G'day guys, welcome back to another episode of Aussie Wild. And this week we're actually going to be doing something just a little bit more different and probably a little bit less dangerous than catching a snake by the back end. But this is something that I hold really close to my heart. I've been through it all. I know all the ins and outs, and it's about time that I share them with you guys, because as much as this is such an important issue here in Australia, I just feel like not enough people are doing their part to raise awareness about it. And as much as I have already done my own little podcast, which was called Corona and Lyme, I just don't think it got the traction that I would have liked to raise the awareness that we really need about Lyme disease here in Australia. So, as the saying goes, a picture tells 1,000 words. So in this particular instance, I decided to put out a video. And in this video, I'm gonna put all the images, all the video clips that I've taken along the way, and just do a really thorough depiction of the things that I went through while I was struggling with Lyme disease here in Australia. And if you aren't up to scratch on what I've been through over the last 4 years or so, I have spent the last 4 years absolutely battling my way through Borrelia, which is Lyme disease, Bartonella, Rickettsia, and Babesia, along with a really bad long COVID infection, which I'll get to a little bit more later. But it has been an absolute battle to get to where I am now. I started off at 0.00001% health, and I reckon I'm back to about 95% health. And it's my duty to share with you guys how I got here and how you guys can get through your own Lyme disease battle while no medical professionals are going to take you seriously along the way, and the government is doing absolutely diddly squat to help us. So here I am sharing my story with you guys, but we're going to do it casually, and I'm going to tell you piece by piece from the beginning to now exactly what I did to get here. All right, so now that the introductions are all out of the way, let's get a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more relaxed, and let's take a little bit of a journey back to where this all started. So let's sort of go back to around about April 2022 to where this all began. I was working full-time as a driver through all of the COVID lockdowns, through all of that period, and I was doing probably 8 hours a day, 600 to 1,000 kilometers a week of driving, and I was really busy. I was flat out like a lizard drinking, as the old Steve Irwin used to say, but that wasn't even having any impact on me. I was doing really well. And then what happened was we were able to start traveling again. And a friend of mine from out in Broken Hill, he decided, oh, guess what? I'm coming to Sydney. You said you have a red belly black snake spot. I've never seen one. Do you think you could take me to your red belly black snake spot? I would love to see one in the wild. And I was like, well, it's a little bit late in the season. I don't usually go this time of year, but I was persuaded into thinking, well, you know, it's just a little herping trip. Why don't we get out there and go and see some snakes just before winter kicks in, basically. So the day that we decided to go down to the south coast of New South Wales, it was absolutely bucketing with rain, and I almost pulled out, and I definitely wish I did now after what I've been through over the last 4 years. But we trudged on, we got down there, and we ended up in Boordaree National Park. So this is where it all happened, where I was bitten by the ticks initially. So Boordaree National Park on the south coast is just outside of Vincentia, and it's very close to a popular beach known as Caves Beach. So when you get out of the car park, there's a hill that goes down to either the beach on the left or there's a swamp to the right. And if you go to the swamp on the right, there's quite a healthy population of red-bellied black snakes that live around that swamp. And at the right time of year, you can see, 15 or 20 red-bellied black snakes in a single lap of that swamp. I love it down there personally. I always loved going down there. It's one of my favorite spots to visit. But I had never gone that late in the year. So I was leading the way on our little lap around the swamp, we found plenty of red-bellied black snakes, and ticks were the last thing on our mind. Like, it didn't even cross my mind or occur to me that while we were out chasing snakes, there could have been ticks latching onto our legs. I was much more focused on the fact that we were catching one of the world's most dangerous snakes. Obviously, that takes priority over a tiny, tiny little thing that could potentially harbor a life-threatening bacteria or, parasitic illness. So we did our laps, we filmed a few videos with some black snakes, and we decided to call it a day because it was bucketing down with rain, and the friend that I was with had to get back to Sydney so he could catch a plane early the next morning. But usually what would happen is, after I did my lap of the swamp when I was there in warmer weather, I would usually walk down to the beach and have a swim. So every time I've gone there in the past, it's almost like I've showered immediately after by using the surf and the gentle undulations of the waves it must have usually just washed off the ticks that had been sitting on my skin or whatever. But what happened this time, we had to leave. So I drove straight down there, did the lap, and then straight back to Sydney. And on the 3 hours back to Sydney, that's when things must have taken a turn, because when I arrived home 3 hours later, I counted 17 ticks that had latched onto my legs, both legs. They were covered in welts. And what it was, they were larval stage ticks. So it looked to me a lot like mosquito bites with a bit of a dark spot at the top of them. And when I saw it, I knew exactly what they were straight away. I was like, oh, all right. I plucked them all out and I counted 17. And when I plucked out that last tick, I remember getting up, looking in the mirror and just going, mate, this is not going to be good. I knew it straight away. And, that's pretty much where that day ended, because I asked my friend and he didn't actually get any ticks himself. So it must have been that I was the one leading the way. I was the one brushing all the bushes. I was the one who got the ticks. Seems a little bit unfair when you're doing someone a favor, but what can you do? I got it. I had to deal with it, and here I am now. So every other time that I've been bitten by ticks in my life, I have felt a little bit crook, lethargic, nauseous, a little bit fluey for probably a week to 2 weeks after getting bitten. And I used to call that tick flu. I was like, oh, look, I can't go this weekend. I've got a bit of tick flu from last weekend kind of thing. And that usually does subside within a week or two. This time, however, I went back to work, and not only did the tick bites swell up and get much, much worse, they ended up becoming those bullseye rashes. So some of them just subsided, some of them went away, but 4 or 5 of them became those large bullseye rashes. That is a pretty significant demonstration that you've got Borrelia forming under the skin.
Okay, so I just wanted to quickly show you the initial bite sites in real time, just in case you guys ever get bitten by ticks down the track and you wanted to refer to this video as a bit of a guideline. It could definitely come in handy for you. So this was within about the first 1 to 3 days of being bitten initially, and as you can see, there is already considerable amounts of inflammation and swelling around the bite sites, especially spreading throughout the rest of my thigh muscle. Now, it is actually noteworthy, I reckon, that the surrounding area was actually really warm and really hot to touch. Now, my doctor initially prescribed me with Ibolex 500 just to get on top of the initial signs and symptoms from the original tick bites themselves. Obviously, the antibiotic that I needed was doxycycline, and these ones didn't actually benefit me in any way, but it was quite nice of her to actually take the time and consideration to actually give me something to treat these tick bites. Now, these second images were actually about 1 to 2 weeks after being bitten initially, And this was after having taken those Imrex antibiotics, and I sort of just continued living a normal life as best that I could at the time. You can clearly see that they've become rashy and bruised, and I think this was my version of the bullseye rash. You can clear as day see where I was bitten, and you can clear as day see how they've become sort of infected by something. Okay, so these are probably my favorite two images that just sort of clear as day show the destruction that was caused to my legs from whatever infection had entered into my system from those initial tick bites. And as you can see, the red rashy side of things has sort of subsided, sort of started to fade away. But alternatively, you can just see that my legs or the inside of my thigh muscles have just turned into these big, severe bruises. And it's spread as far as the infection had spread down my thigh. It was all just bruised up and it was incredibly painful.
I didn't think anything of it at the time because I've always been raised to believe that we don't get Lyme disease in Australia, or we only get Lyme-like disease in Australia. And until this point in my life, no one in Australia has ever actually demonstrated to me or educated to me the actual significance of the Australian tick bite and what can actually happen if you get bitten by Australian ticks. So for the next 2 months, about 2 months or so, I carried on working. So it was really tricky at the beginning, but I still thought, oh, it's just a bit of tick flu, it'll pass. And incredibly, after the 17 initial tick bites that I got down in Vincentia, I think it was about 3 or so weeks later, I actually decided to go back down to Vincentia because I started feeling a little bit better and I wanted to go and see a girl that I'd been talking to who lived down there. So, you know what a guy's like when he gets that kind of thing on his mind, back in the car, straight back down to Vincentia. It's only a little bit of tick inflammation, that'll never hurt us. So me and my mate went back down there and we actually went back to the spot that I had been bitten by the initial 17 ticks. That was probably a very, very stupid decision on my behalf. Anyway, nothing happened down at the site that day, but me and my friend went straight back to the apartment and then went straight to the Huskisson Hotel. So we went out for drinks that night. And by the time we came home, there was a very small tick that had embedded itself in my ankle. Man, you're hearing this probably going, what is wrong with this bloke's luck at this point in time? Anyway, we got in the car, a few beers deep, and we drove to the McDonald's in Nowra, I think it is, or maybe a fair bit back from Nowra, but it's, 20 minutes down the road. And I remember saying to my mate, oh, bro, what was in those drinks? And I literally was seeing like the road was like this. It was just bouncing back and forth, like my brain was just going in circles basically. Anyway, I thought I was just drunk and we went home to sleep. So I woke up and you know how you wake up, you feel hungover. So then I went to meet up with the girl that I was talking about and we went and watched seals and that all went quite smoothly, but my ankle was incredibly inflamed. And I remember mentioning that to the girl and I was like, oh, is there anything you've got that could like bring down the swelling? So she gave me an antihistamine and I took that just before I left her, and me and my mate started to drive back to Sydney from Vincentia, which is like a 3-hour drive. And we took the scenic route through Kangaroo Valley, which is very bendy, and we wanted to go and see some wombats at Bendeela Campground. By the time I got to Bendeela Campground, my mate got out and he was like, oh, there's one. And I was literally like, bros, get me home. I feel so sick. I feel like I'm dying. It was like that. And for the rest of the car trip home, which is like probably 2 hours from there, I didn't say a single word. I slept the whole way home and he had to sort of like walk me to my front door because I just lost all sort of mobility, all sort of movement in my face. I just felt dead. So my body at this point in time has taken a complete flogging, which brings me to the next part of this story. I got to about June and things really started to take a turn for the worst. So I remember probably two significant moments where, one, I went and dropped off some documents to a high skyscraper in the Sydney CBD, and it felt to me like I was rocking on a boat and I was getting seasick from the sway of the building. That was number one. That was the first time I was like, oh mate, this is not going well. And the second time is when I went out for about 2 beers on a date the night before work. And 2 beers is not meant to make someone who's very used to drinking alcohol hungover for their next work day. I left about 10 o'clock at night, had a really early night, a great feed before I went to sleep, and woke up absolutely horrendous. And when I got to work, the manager that I was working for at the time actually looked at me and said, big night last night, Lockie. You've got the really dark bags under your eyes. And I was like, oh, I only had 2 beers. I shouldn't. Anyway, I went into the bathroom just to suss it out, and I looked like I was dying. And that particular morning, I felt so nauseous in the stomach that before I left for my run for the day, I actually had to take a garbage bag from under the sink because I knew I'd feel sick while I was driving. And I was not wrong, because on the first couple of drops of the day, I was throwing up at traffic lights. I was throwing up before I would see clients. And mate, it was just a disaster. And it was that particular day that I actually had to hand in my resignation and leave a job that I actually really, really enjoyed doing. So that was the point where I realized something was not quite right and I really, really needed help immediately. But what I didn't understand was help was going to be so difficult to find here in Australia. All right, so this is where the fun all started. So at the start of June, I basically started looking for treatment because I left work and I really needed to get better so I could make money, because at this point I was not on Centrelink. I had no idea what was happening. I just thought I was really, really sick at this point in time. So I went and saw my GP, and I was actually diagnosed with indigestion, and I was given Gaviscon Plus and a reflux medicine. So that was what I was meant to take at the start. Then that did absolutely nothing, which I could have told you it was going to do. So I went back and saw him another probably week or so later. Mind you, this whole time I'm on my couch and it felt like I was seasick on a boat that I just couldn't get off of. So I went back and saw my GP and he said, oh, so the Gaviscon wasn't working and you've still got the indigestion? And I was like, look, there's more to it than this. There's something really sinister going on within my body. And my doctor said, oh, okay, why don't we do a breath test, which is like a balloon angioplasty, I think they're called, or a balloon angiogram or something. And that's where you blow into a big silver bubble and you send it off for breath analysis and they work out whether or not you've got stomach ulcers. So that was test number 2. Obviously, didn't have stomach ulcers because it was from all the tick bites. Then, because in between waiting for that bubble to come back, there was a 3-week wait turnaround time between getting results and doing the test. So I went and saw another 2 GPs in between that 3-week period, and both of them, they diagnosed me with indigestion and recommended that I used Gaviscon Plus and a certain type of reflux medicine. And this is after I literally pulled the leggings of my pants down and said, there is 17 tick bites and the symptoms only appeared after I was bitten. Other than that, I'm a really healthy 30-year-old man. And every doctor that I'd seen up until this point literally had the exact same response to tick bites in Australia. It was almost like it was pre-written and they all wrote the same response together. And every time they answered me, like, oh, these symptoms have all occurred since being bitten by ticks, they all looked at me and said, well, we don't get Lyme disease in Australia. It can't be that. And it was word for word to the point that it almost seemed like a conspiracy. And I just couldn't believe that these doctors were actually not only getting upset and offended at me for like questioning their diagnosis and, their prescriptions and all of those sorts of things. They were almost sort of belittling me for even bringing up the fact that we could potentially have Lyme disease here in Australia. It was like a no-go zone. It was like, don't touch that topic in my office or you can get the fuck out. It was honestly like that. And that's how I felt a lot of the time when I saw doctors. And this went on for a while. Like, I just kept seeing GPs for the next few weeks to the point where I just couldn't go on. And it was actually not until my dad came around one day and he was like, so what's going on? Like, what is making you so sick? And I told him my symptoms and I told him, I got bitten by all these ticks. And he was the first person to look me in the eyes and just go, mate, it sounds like you've got Lyme disease. A friend of mine from Palm Beach used to get the exact same symptoms that you've got now. And I was like, bing! That's when the light bulb moment went off in my head. And that's when I was like, okay, I seriously can't go on any longer. Like, I feel like I'm dying. I'm going to sign up to the Lyme Disease Association of Australia Facebook page. And I put up a post reaching out and I was like, look, this is what's happened. I've been bitten by 17 ticks. I haven't been the same since. I've had to resign from work. Every GP that I'm seeing and every blood test that I've had is just saying that I'm healthy and that I've only got indigestion. And literally within like 10 minutes, they were like, okay, it sounds like you've got tick-borne infections, potentially Borrelia, definitely co-infections. You need to see this doctor. Now, I'm not going to name the doctor or the practice. If you guys want to know who they are, you can reach out to me privately and I can give you guidance in, the direction you can head to get some actual treatment here in Sydney. But then I got in touch with this particular doctor or this particular practice, and they responded with, sorry, this doctor isn't taking patients until next year. So as you can imagine, it's, let's say, July at this point in time. I would be waiting like 5 or 6 months until I could see the doctor. And it was at that point that I was just about ready to call it. I was like, oh, nah, I can't carry on the way I'm carrying on for 6 more months without any help whatsoever. And just as I was starting to sort of get those, iffy thoughts in my brain, I got a little message it was like a sign from whoever's looking out for me. And I looked into my inbox in my Gmail account and it said, oh, by the way, the doctor actually considered your case and she said she's willing to see you. If you'd like to book an appointment, we've got a spot for you within 2 or 3 weeks. And I was like, ping! Like, I was so happy. I was so happy that someone was finally going to take me seriously. At this point in time, I had had probably 6 blood tests, all of which have come back with absolutely nothing sinister. My bloods were a little bit, iffy, but pretty healthy overall for a standard 30-year-old bloke. Now, when I went and saw this specialist, straight away she said, okay, this sounds serious. We're going to take some new bloods. And in my head, I was like, oh, not more blood tests, like not this again. How do we need to take more kind of thing? But she basically said, no. It's actually really important that we take your bloods and send them down to the Rickettsial Reference Laboratory in Geelong. And that's where they basically test for infectious diseases here in Australia. So we did that and we sent them down to Geelong, which is actually an out-of-pocket expense. So if you're going to get this done, I think it costs somewhere between $100 and $200. So it's not too expensive. So we sent them down and we waited for the return of my bloods. I think that took about 2 weeks. And then I had another appointment with the doctor to basically work out A, what was going on, and B, how can we make you feel better? So I went there and she said, okay, it's quite serious, Lachlan. You've actually got Bartonella, Rickettsia, and Babesia. And she said, but it tested negative for Lyme disease. Now that is funny. Well, funny in a way that later on, I sent my bloods over to California because I was actually so convinced that I had Lyme disease, and they came back positive. But I'll get onto that later. So basically what she had done for me is she had organized a parasite regime or a treatment plan for me. And this was to treat, the Bartonella, Rickettsia and Babesia that I had floating around in the system. So this basically included 15 weeks of antibiotics along with some herbal supplements to assist my body with destroying this bacteria that was in my system. And I've actually got that very first treatment plan right here for you guys. So I'll tell you just how much I was actually taking at this point in time. So along with my anti-epileptic medication, which is 2 Tegretol tablets in the morning and 2 in the evening, I was also taking doxycycline twice a day, azithromycin once every 3 days, and tripram every morning. So that's the antibiotic side of this treatment plan or parasite regime. Then I was taking herbal tinctures, which included Cogni's Detox, 8 drops twice per day, Cyclocalm 2, 12 drops twice per day, and then MC Bar 1, 8 drops twice per day. Then I had to start with methylene blue, and this stuff makes your piss absolutely fluorescent blue. It looks like you're peeing out Powerade, and it tastes horrendous. It's that stuff that should really just be used as a universal indicator in a chemistry laboratory. I was taking 10 drops in a glass of water twice per day. Then the supplement side of things, I was taking Multigen Biotic, 2 caps twice per day, Gut Orthoplex 2 scoops twice per day, Spore Biotic Spectrum Cuticles 1 cap, Glutathione capsules 1 cap, RN Labs Magnesium Citrate 2 caps, Liver Protecting 1 cap, Basica Active Minerals 1 scoop, Imrex Biomedica 1 cap, and Mushroom Matrix 1 cap. So as you can imagine, that's literally a full-time job in itself, just taking the medications that you need to take to actually beat this illness. And half of the medications don't even do anything. As you can imagine, I'm absolutely fatigued. I'm absolutely drained. I'm taking all of this extra medication that I just don't need to take. I think I counted 32 different things or 32 different times a day I was taking pills or scoops or tinctures. And it just became like so taxing on my body. Anyway, the antibiotic cycle lasted for about 15 weeks, and then we continued with those herbal treatments and those extra supplements. So I guess now that I'd found my treating doctor, I'd been diagnosed with tick-borne illness, and I had a sort of well thought out treatment plan put in place, I was ready for the recovery stages of my journey. Now, this went on for the rest of 2022, but I want to tell you a few things going into this that I wish someone told me. So first and foremost, you're going to lose a lot of friends along the way. A lot of people are just going to lose interest in you because you don't bring the joy that you used to bring to their life, or that they just simply don't understand what it is that you're going through. That's number one. I want everyone to know that going into this. And also, while I'm actually on the topic of losing friends along the way, it's also really important that you find yourself a really strong support network to get yourself through this. So obviously I had my mum. She was probably the closest person to me throughout all of this. Then the rest of my family, and then like 4 or 5 really close friends. But what I've found a lot of the time, a lot of people that were sending me gifts and get well soon cards and stuff like that, they weren't close friends. They were people that I've never met before, and they were just social media strangers that I've probably spoken to once or twice along the way, who just like my videos and like who I am as a person. So I was actually getting more get well soon cards from complete strangers than I was getting from my actual close friends, which I just thought was really interesting. And just one other thing, I met a girl online, obviously, like through my Instagram page, and she got sick at the exact same time that I got sick. So I got, the Lyme disease, the Bartonella, the Borrelia, the Rickettsia, the Babesia, all of those things. But she unfortunately got diagnosed with brain cancer. And at the start of all of this, I said to her, "Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean for you now?" And she was so strong, so positive. It just sort of rubbed off onto me. And she just responded with, "Oh, mate, I've been through worse. She'll be right." Literally, after getting diagnosed with brain cancer, that was her response. It was sort of like we spoke to each other almost every day. And if I didn't speak to her every day, I would see her journey and her treatment that she was going through. And I would basically tell myself in the morning, if she can do it, I can do it. So every morning she was like my driving factor just to get out of bed in the morning and try my best to achieve something throughout the day. Because I knew if she was doing something, mate, I've got no excuses. But unfortunately, in the middle of 2023, brain cancer finally got the better of her and she actually passed away, which was just so sad. I was really, really upset about that. I did grieve quite hard about that because then in my brain, it was almost like, well, she didn't make it. So, maybe that means I'm not going to make it. Like I started getting those, what ifs, why, she wasn't immune to it, so maybe I'm not immune to getting sick and dying. So that was really tragic in my sort of healing journey. However, I would like to say, rest her soul. I saw her just before she passed away and she posted an image of her with, no hair, because she was obviously going through radiation and chemotherapy. And she had put on a lot of weight, which was really upsetting because she was a very beautiful girl. And I basically said to myself, all right, from this moment forward, I'm going to grow my hair as long as it takes until I'm better. And then I'm going to cut it off and donate it to the Cancer Council so they can make wigs out of my hair. And funnily enough, 3 years later, I'm still growing it. But just have a look at this. That's my hair now. So that's why I always tie it up at the back. Oh. But that's where we are now. And that is what I call the Balmain, like it's my main, and I live in Balmain, so a little play on words there, but this will all be someone's hair in the future that's going through chemo or radiation therapy. And I just think, so just because she was such a big part of my healing journey, such an inspiration to me while I was going through the first couple years of my healing journey, I feel just out of respect to her and to the cancer community, I felt like I really wanted to do this. So I've been growing my hair for 3 years now and it's going to be chopped off in the near future. But this is something that means the world to me because she was such an influential person in the first early stages of my Lyme disease recovery. And honestly, keep your eyes peeled because you're going to find inspiration in the weirdest possible places. Like, it might not be this, but if you're looking for it and you keep your eyes open, you will be inspired by the craziest things that are going to help you get through this journey. And look at the bright side. If I ever go bald, I've always got this to look back on. So I'm really proud of that. And I just thought I would share that with you guys as an inspiration to you, what you might find along the way to help you get through this journey. Number 2 is that every GP in Australia is not going to be your friend when dealing with tick-borne illnesses. I went into this thinking that, you get sick, you go and see a doctor, they give you the treatment that you need, Bob's your sister, you get on with things. Not when you're dealing with tick-borne illness. So please don't listen to any standard GPs here in Australia because a lot of the time they're going to misdiagnose you and they're going to give you the wrong prescriptions. What you're aiming to get immediately after getting bitten by a tick is doxycycline antibiotics. And if it's a serious infection, you're going to need extra help. You're going to need extra antibiotics. You're going to need extra supplements. And the GPs just won't do it. You need specialist care. And I also wanted to add to that, Australian standardized blood tests, they're not going to help you either because tick-borne illnesses will not show up on standardized Australian blood tests. You need to send your bloods down to the Rickettsial Reference Laboratory down in Geelong. And that's where you'll get the right diagnosis. And the third and final thing that I want to tell you guys is that your life is going to go from this to this. It's going to get absolutely flipped on its ass, and it's probably going to go from bad to worse before it gets better. And it's just something that you need to understand going into it. You need to be kind to yourself, and you just need to roll with the punches, because you can't speed these things up, and they're going to take time to heal. Your body is in a really serious state, and it needs the treatment and it needs the recovery time. Please don't force yourself into doing more than you need to, because there's a good chance you'll make things worse. Like, if you can, don't go to work. Take time off work, resign from work, and just really focus on the next few months of recovery, because it's really important. And I cannot stress that enough. You can make this worse if you try and tough it out. I did, and anyone else can do the same thing. Now, something that I do get asked a lot about from people that have seen my videos or heard my podcasts, they actually want to know a lot about herxing. And if you guys aren't familiar with herxing, I'm probably going to butcher this word, but it's what is called a Herxheimer reaction. And that's basically to do with the dieback of the bacteria within your system causes inflammation, and different symptoms start to flare up at certain times of the treatment protocols or different times of the month and that type of thing. In fact, at the start of this whole thing, I never really herxed. It was not something that I really experienced. I actually felt more just terrible 24/7. And gradually, I started to improve slowly. It was never like I had a day here and there where sort of my herxing flared up and I felt like I could noticeably feel a Herxheimer reaction or something like that. That wasn't something that I really experienced myself. And I know a lot of you guys experience it, but up until this point, it wasn't something that I was going through. So I can't really help you at the early stages of tick infection, but it definitely did happen to me later on down the track. And I will fill you in on that a little bit further on in the story. So I guess this is where my next few months of recovery started. So I went along with the treatment plan and parasite regime that had been put in place. And at the start, it didn't really seem to be working. So I just really tried my best to be as active and as active in the brain as I possibly could. So every day I'd get up and I'd try and set myself a few tasks. But the main thing that I did, and I was really grateful for this, my dad and my best friend Razi used to come around sort of once or twice a week and take me for little walks around the block, or drive me down to the local park where we would go for a little walk with their dog. And that really, really helped me in the early stages of getting my confidence back and starting to move again and all of those sorts of things. But it was in the first sort of couple of walks that I went on by myself, which would have been in the first couple of weeks of treatment, that I first experienced Lyme arthritis. So I walked from my house down to Mort Bay, which is probably about a 2-kilometer return. And I didn't think anything of it at the time, but when I got home, my legs seemed a little bit sore. And when I woke up the next morning, the joint pain between my hip joints was just excruciating. It felt like I was an old man. It was like they were creaking when I was walking. So that was my first experience with Lyme arthritis, but it was one of the only experiences that I had with Lyme arthritis. It lasted for about a week or two, and then it sort of just subsided and went away. But then I wanted to start being more mentally active, because I was lying on the couch watching TV a lot of the time, and that's not good for anyone's mindset. It's not good for anyone's recovery. So I had a lot of old footage that I had filmed on previous Aussie Wild adventures, especially the last road trip that I went on with a friend of mine called Jade. And we went from Sydney to Broken Hill to the Warrumbungle National Park, and then Warrumbungle's back down the east coast. And I took a hell of a lot of footage, a hell of a lot of me with wildlife talking about different creatures, a hell of a lot of landscape shots, drone footage. So I had like the perfect amount of footage to use to edit to create different YouTube videos for my YouTube account. So I spent the next month or so creating 3 YouTube videos, and they took a long time and a lot of effort to put together each one. They were like 30-minute YouTube episodes. So that really kept me busy for the next sort of month or so. Then after that, I had been working on some t-shirt designs just before I got sick, and I sort of put it on the back burner while I was sick. But as I slowly started to get a little bit better and my brain a little bit more active, I pulled these t-shirt designs back out of the woodwork, and I actually created a clothing for conservation charity organization where I raised money for numbat conservation. And I think I raised about $3,000. So I was basically selling black and white t-shirts with the two different logo designs on the front and back. And this went really well. I was really happy with the support I got off my social media. So that was really good. I couldn't thank those people enough because it kept me busy for another month or so. But then I really started to get a bit more energy back, a bit more pep in my step, and I actually started to do things that were far more physical. Like, I think initially I started going skateboarding again, which was so good for my mental health. And then I actually started going hiking again, which was absolutely amazing. I started finding little creatures along the way. I was taking photos. I was filming little Aussie wild clips again, and I felt amazing. But on my third bushwalk at Ku-ring-gai National Park, I think it was, I was just doing a bit of bush bashing. I hadn't lost my interest. I hadn't gotten, PTSD from the ticks that I had previously. And I was basically just doing what I usually do. So I was flipping rocks and looking in crevices and all of those sorts of things. And I actually found a common tree snake just at the end of my bushwalk, and I did a quick video with it. So I was filming this little video with the common tree snake, and it felt like something sort of stung my eye while I was, filming this little clip. And it kind of felt like a drop of sweat had just gone into a micro cut into my eyelid. So I didn't think anything of it at the time, like I usually don't. And I kept filming, but there is a moment in the footage that you can actually see when I'm like, what was that? And it was, in fact, a tick that bit me straight on the eyelid. So this was the worst thing that had happened to me for a while. Now, because my immune system was still quite flat from all the stuff I'd been going through, by the time I got home, my eyelid looked like I had just been king it by Mike Tyson. It was like the whole left side of my face was just this swollen mess. So I've recently been getting over Lyme disease from an Australian tick bite. And I've been going quite well. I've been getting back outdoors and doing some things. But I forgot that my doctor said that now I'm allergic to tick bites. And yesterday I was out and boop, something absolutely nailed me on the eyelid, and now the swelling is just absurd. I can't even open that eye. It's like hidden from the world. So I'm about to take some steroids to get that thing down again. But yeah, wear your bloody tick repellent. Anyway, I got a specialist appointment with my doctor the next morning. It wasn't going to be so quick, but I sent her a photo of what my face looked like, and she was basically like, oh my God, let me book you in right now. So we did that. I got some steroids. I think it was prednisolone. I took a fair few of them. I put ice on it, and within sort of 48 hours, it had subsided again. But it was, quite a scary sight. I looked a bit like the Elephant Man. So I've taken some steroids, and now I'm halfway between normal and the Elephant Man. But my eye's back open again, and we're coming along. So hopefully by tonight, this thing has subsided substantially. So that was a little bit discouraging, but it was also great because I realized that every tick is not going to kill me, and every bad experience in the bush is not going to kill me. So we kept on moving. Now, this is sort of where the back end of the year got me feeling like I was back to normal. I went on my first date or date-like experience, and, after 6 months of not seeing any women, or not, having any companionship from any women, it was really nice. Like, I felt almost back to my true self again. It was like a really nice day. And at this point in time, I was like, okay, things are starting to go my way again. I reckon next year is going to be my year. but boy, was I sadly mistaken. And we continued this to about November. And by that stage, we did another set of blood tests. And they came back looking quite good. And my doctor actually said, well, great news, Lachlan, there's no more Bartonella in your system. And I was just like, you bloody beauty. You bloody beauty. Couldn't believe it. I was so happy that that had happened. And she said, it actually looks like you're starting to improve. And I was like, yes, I'm starting to improve. My morale went up. Everything went up about me. I was doing more. I was happy again. I was working a little bit. I was doing snake rescues. I was drinking caffeine again. I was able to drink alcohol again. And I continued living like a normal person, even lifting weights again. And I continued living like this until about December, when I decided that, okay, it's New Year's Eve. I want to go and see my friends for the first time in 6 months. And I want to go out on New Year's Eve to farewell what has been the worst year of my life so far. And that's exactly what I did. I had a few beers in a mate's garden and things were going well. We were having a laugh. We were having a yarn. I was just really, really enjoying myself, being out, being amongst it, being a little bit tipsy and just enjoying a night out again. It was fantastic. Then I made the decision to go down and watch the fireworks in my local park, which is in Balmain, Elkington Park. And the fireworks were great as well. Everything was going smoothly up until this point. And after the fireworks, this is where it's one of those life-changing moments, life-changing decisions that I could just see unfolding in front of my eyes. When I look back on it now, it's like, why didn't I make the other decision? So my mate goes, all right, what do you want to do now? Should we go up into Balmain and go up to like the local pubs? And I was a little bit tipsy and I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds like a great idea. Which at the same time, I could have very easily just gone, you know what? I'm still getting used to it all. Maybe I'll just go home because that park is about 100 meters from my house. Then we went into the local pubs in Balmain to this real dingy, shitty one called the Unity Hall Hotel. And it was totally fine. I was having a laugh. I was enjoying myself.
Yeah, go on then.
My mate ended up going elsewhere and I ended up sitting with just a close friend of his, or a close friend of both of ours. And that's who I spent most of the night with at this pub, drinking, having a laugh. But then two absolute plebs rocked up. And these two absolute idiots, they had just been around a whole group of people that had COVID. And they knew that they were around people that had COVID. They even said it when they got there. But at this point in time, I didn't think anything of it because I had had COVID before and it did absolutely nothing to me. So stupidly, I went and greeted one of them and I gave one of them a hug. That right there was the worst decision of my life, probably in my entire life. Because if that didn't happen, the next 3 years of my life wouldn't have happened. I thought nothing of it at the time. I just continued having a laugh. They went and did their own thing. And that's when I woke up the next morning and I was like, oh, I've got a bit of a sniffle. That's not like me. I don't usually get the sniffles after a big night out, or not a small one anyway. And then, you know, over the next couple of days, those symptoms started to get worse. And I was like, oh, maybe I've got the flu, like maybe something, you know. I was coming up with all these different scenarios in my head. So I told my mum, hey, can you bring me some COVID tests? So she did, and I had the COVID test and it came back positive. So in my head, I was like, oh, this is the worst. This is the absolute worst. And from that point on, the next 12 months were probably the worst 12 months of my life. 2023 was absolutely horrendous.
All right, guys, that brings us to the end of part 1 of my Lyme disease journey, but don't you worry because there is a lot more to come. So 2023, as I just said, was the worst of this entire Lyme period. So stay tuned for that. And I really hope that you guys are benefiting from the information that I'm putting into these episodes and that it actually helps you with the knowledge that you need to get through your own Lyme disease journey. But I thought just quickly before I leave you guys today, I wanted to leave you with some words that I wrote to myself during a really, really dark and difficult point in my Lyme disease struggle. And I hope they resonate with you guys as well. So here we go. No matter what life places in your path, never forget the strength and resilience you have already proven to yourself throughout this time. Hardship reveals a profound truth. Closeness does not always guarantee support in your darkest hour, yet through it all, you learn to stand by yourself, and in doing so, you discover your greatest power. Just as pressure creates diamonds, it is struggle that shapes your unbreakable spirit. You don't know how strong you truly are until being strong becomes the only option that you have. Anyway, I'll leave it there, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I'll see you next week for 2023. And please do us a favour, if you get the chance, be sure to like, subscribe and share it with anyone who actually needs to hear this information, because I'm not doing it for me, I'm doing it for you guys out there. So if you could get it around and make sure the people that need to hear it do hear it, that would be fantastic. Thanks heaps, and I'll catch you next week.